She didn't reject you, she didn't humiliate you, she didn't betray you. She just chose not to be yours, and that was what shattered you. Because you weren't actually in love. You were invested in the idea that she should choose you back, validate you, reciprocate your certainty. You weren't seeking connection. You were seeking control wrapped in compliments disguised as romance. Let's be honest. You didn't want her freedom. You wanted her certainty. You wanted to know that her attention wouldn't shift, that her silence wouldn't arrive, that her absence would never dare threaten you. But here's the truth. You don't own her. You never did. And love was never meant to be proof of your worth. Because when she walked away, you weren't heartbroken. You were unmasked. You called it rejection, but it was really a confrontation with the part of you that still needs to be chosen to feel valuable. That's not love. That's dependency. A stoic man knows better. He doesn't chase clarity. He doesn't punish change. He doesn't need ownership to feel connected. He allows space. He respects movement. And when love walks away, he doesn't flinch. He just whispers, "She never owed me forever, only truth, and she gave me that by leaving." She didn't yell. She didn't block you. She didn't send some final dramatic message. She just stopped showing up with the same energy. Her replies slowed down. Her gaze drifted elsewhere. Her presence started feeling thinner. And your mind, it filled in the blanks fast. She's rejecting me. She's losing interest. She doesn't see my value. But pause for a second. Was she really rejecting you? Or were you just losing control of the version of her you built in your head? Because here's what you won't admit. You didn't panic because she left. You panicked because she stopped responding in the way that kept you feeling secure. This isn't about love. This is about control disguised as connection. You mistook attention for affection. You mistook consistency for commitment. You mistook her autonomy for betrayal. But the truth is, she didn't owe you certainty. She didn't sign a contract. She didn't swear allegiance to your need for emotional safety. She just shifted, and instead of adjusting, you called it rejection. But really what was rejected was the illusion you wrapped her in. You built expectations she never agreed to. You created a version of her who would stay soft, stay close, stay yours, forever available to validate your worth. And when the reality didn't match the narrative, you collapsed. Not because she was gone, but because the structure you leaned on crumbled. That version of her wasn't love, it was possession. And the moment she stepped outside of that role, you didn't grieve her. You grieved the control you thought you had. Stoic men see this moment differently. They don't call it betrayal, they call it information. They don't say, "She turned her back on me." They say, "She turned back to herself." Because her shift wasn't a punishment, it was her process. And how you responded, that was your revelation. You didn't get rejected, you just got reminded you never owned anything in the first place. And the sooner you stop needing people to mirror your security, the sooner you build it on your own. Because when a woman changes, you have two choices. Collapse and blame her for the fall, or stand still and learn what part of you was never standing on solid ground to begin with. Be honest, you didn't want her love. You wanted her certainty. You wanted to know she'd answer every text, that she'd smile the same way every time you showed up, that her energy wouldn't shift even when yours did. You didn't want connection, you wanted guarantees. And when she stopped playing by the script, you called it rejection. But it wasn't that. It was the loss of control. That subtle sense of ownership you had over her emotional availability. You weren't trying to share love. You were trying to manage an outcome, to secure your comfort through someone else's consistency. But love doesn't work that way. It's not a system you can stabilize. It's not a role someone performs on cue. It moves, it breathes, it shifts, and unless you've done the work to hold yourself steady, her movement will always feel like a threat. Because here's the truth, you were okay with her freedom as long as she used it to choose you. But when she chose space, distance, silence, that freedom suddenly became a problem. Why? Because you never wanted a whole person. You wanted a predictable mirror, one that reflected your value on demand. That's not love, that's control. And control, when threatened, doesn't stay quiet. It reacts, it spirals, it scrambles to rebuild the illusion. You started texting more, explaining yourself, asking what happened when deep down you already knew. She shifted, and instead of respecting it, you tried to rewind her. But people aren't songs you replay, they're rivers, and the more you try to hold them still, the faster they slip through your fingers. A stoic man knows this. He doesn't cling, he doesn't coerce, he doesn't perform presence just to regain control. He watches, he listens, he accepts that connection is a privilege, not a possession. And when it fades, he doesn't collapse, he calibrates. Because he knows if he only felt secure when she responded, then he was never really secure at all. So what did you really want? You wanted certainty, control, emotional insurance. But love isn't built in insurance policies. It's built in moments, freely given, freely received. And when it stops coming, your job isn't to force it. It's to ask, did I love her? Or did I just love how I felt when she loved me back? You told yourself all you wanted was to be chosen. You thought that if she looked at you, picked you, stayed with you, it would mean you mattered, that you were enough, worthy, finally seen. But that's the myth, isn't it? The lie we build our self-worth around, that someone else's affection is the final stamp of our value. That love is a verdict, and if you don't get picked, then you must have failed. But what if being chosen was never the goal? What if the real question is, do you still know your worth when no one's choosing you today? Because here's the danger, when your identity depends on being chosen, you'll chase validation disguised as love. You'll contort, overgive, perform, not to connect but to be approved. You'll stop being yourself and start becoming who you think they'll pick. And even if they do choose you, it won't land. Because deep down, you'll always wonder, did she choose me or the version I shaped for her attention? That's not security, that's emotional fraud. And the moment she stops choosing you, you crash. Not because she left, but because you lost your proof of being valuable. But here's the truth. You were never supposed to be proven. You were supposed to be present. Being chosen doesn't make you more real. Being rejected doesn't make you less. That entire framework of love as validation, it was never built for freedom. It was built for fear. Fear of being invisible, fear of being replaceable, fear that if you're not picked, you disappear. But a stoic man, he dismantles that belief. He doesn't place his identity in the hands of someone else's affection. He shows up fully not to be selected, but because he chooses himself first. And when he's loved, he receives it with grace. And when he's left, he releases with peace. Because he was whole before her, and he'll remain whole after. So ask yourself, was your heartbreak really about losing her? Or was it about losing the feeling of being enough that you outsourced to her presence? Because if your self-worth disappears every time someone walks away, it's not rejection you're facing, it's an invitation. May to finally choose yourself before you ever need someone else to. You keep saying you lost her, but did you? Or did you just lose the sense of authority you thought you had over her emotions? Because if you're honest, you didn't grieve the connection. You grieved the control, the ability to predict her, to expect her to reply, to assume she'd always be there when you needed to feel chosen. You didn't miss the relationship, you missed the certainty, the comfort of knowing someone was orbiting around you. And when she stopped, it felt like betrayal, but it wasn't. It was liberation. Hers. The moment she pulled back, you didn't ask how she felt. You asked how to get her back. Not for her, for you, because her distance wasn't really the pain. The pain was realizing you never had any real power to begin with. Only access, temporary, voluntary, revocable. But that shook you, because most men confuse love with emotional leverage. If I give her enough, if I treat her well, if I stay consistent, then I deserve her closeness. But love doesn't work like that. It's not a transaction, it's not a contract, it's not a currency that buys loyalty. And when the person you gave to chooses to step away, you realise your investment wasn't in connection, it was in control. And that's what hurts. That you thought consistency would guarantee outcome, that being a good man would make her stay, that showing up daily meant she owed you forever. But she didn't, because no one owes you emotional permanence. And if your love was real, you wouldn't need to own her to feel it. Stoic men know this. They don't confuse access with authority. They don't treat closeness like a right. They know that every moment someone chooses you is a gift, not a possession. So when the connection fades, they don't demand it back. They don't guilt. They don't chase. They don't try to reassert control. They simply breathe, release, and remind themselves, I didn't lose her. She was never mine. And that was never the point. Because love that needs ownership to feel safe was never love at all. It was ego in disguise, and now it's time to let that go too. You thought love was proof that you mattered, that you were finally enough, that someone chose you and stayed. You treated her love like a certificate, like evidence you'd passed some invisible test, that all your effort, your growth, your intentions were finally validated. But love isn't proof. And she isn't property. She's not a reward for your effort. She's not a prize you earn by being the good guy. She's not a token for your emotional investment. She's a person. And people change. People choose. People move on, not always because of you, but often in spite of you. And if her leaving felt like an insult, maybe it's because you thought her love justified your identity. But the truth is, no one is responsible for proving your worth to you. That's your job, because when you treat love like proof, you put pressure on every interaction. You make her attention your validation. And when she pulls back, you crumble, not because she's gone, but because your inner compass was never calibrated without her. You turned her into a symbol, a marker of your evolution. A walking mirror that was only supposed to reflect your best angles. But the moment she stopped reflecting you, you called it betrayal. Not because she changed, but because she no longer held the role you silently cast her into. But love isn't meant to perform for you. It's meant to meet you, freely, without demand, without title, without terms. A stoic man knows. Love is not ownership, it's observation, it's permission, it's presence. He doesn't need her to stay to believe he's worthy. He doesn't need her to prove what he should already know. He doesn't cling to her affection like oxygen because he's already learned how to breathe on his own. And he doesn't confuse access with achievement because no one belongs to him. Not even the ones who once held his hand. So let this sink in. She is not your reward. Her love is not your trophy. And her leaving is not your failure. It's a fact, one you can resist or rise through. Because the moment you stop needing love to certify your identity, You free yourself from turning people into property. You begin to love cleaner, stronger, without chains. And that kind of love is the only one worth offering. So no, she didn't reject you. She just reminded you. You don't need to be proven. You need to be present. And that presence starts with letting go of the idea that love was ever something you could own. But I deserved her. That's the voice, isn't it? The one that shows up when she pulls away, when she stops replying, when she chooses someone else or no one at all. It's not sadness that hits you first. It's ego, because you showed up. You stayed consistent. You were different. You listened. You gave. And now you're alone. And the mind starts spinning. She doesn't know what she lost. She'll regret this. I was good to her. But here's the truth. You didn't want her love. You wanted justice. You wanted life to reward you for doing what you thought a good man should do. You thought if you played by the rules, you'd win the girl, get the commitment, be chosen. But love doesn't work on merit. It's not a scoreboard. It doesn't care how much you tried, how much you healed, how much you gave. Because love isn't compensation, and people are not prizes. That voice inside you saying, I deserved her, it's not truth. It's entitlement wearing the mask of heartbreak. It's the part of you that still believes you're owed something for being better than the last guy. But let's be clear, being kind doesn't entitle you to closeness. Being consistent doesn't guarantee you're what she wants. And even when you've done everything right, she's still free to walk away. That's not injustice, that's autonomy. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner your ego stops bleeding every time someone exercises their freedom. A stoic man doesn't say, I deserved her. He says, I offered what I had. If it wasn't received, I release it. No resentment, no narrative, just truth. Because the idea that you deserve love is what keeps you stuck. It turns connection into competition. It turns romance into performance. It turns rejection into war. But what if this isn't war? What if it's just her choice? And what if that choice has nothing to do with your value and everything to do with her alignment? When you let go of the belief that love is something to earn, you begin to love with integrity. No more manipulation, no more emotional accounting, no more scorecards. Just presence, peace, and the quiet power of knowing. Free. You don't need someone to stay to prove that you were worthy of being held. You were already enough, even if she never saw it, even if she never said it, even if she chose to walk. Because her absence isn't a reflection of what you lacked. It's a reminder of what you still believe you must earn instead of become. So silence that voice that screams, I deserved her, and let another voice rise, I don't need to own love to live in it fully. I just need to offer it without needing it to prove anything back. You called her cold, detached, selfish. You said she left without warning, that she didn't even try, that she walked away too easily. But pause. What if her leaving wasn't cruelty? What if it was the most honest thing she ever did? You see, it's easy to label someone the villain when they choose a different path. It's easier to feel abandoned than to admit she didn't lie, she just stopped pretending. And maybe deep down you felt it coming, the moments where her smile didn't fully reach, the pause before her replies, the subtle pulling away you didn't want to name. But you held on to hope, and she held on to silence, because she didn't want to break you, and you didn't want to face the truth, that she wasn't in it anymore, not fully, not the way you needed her to be. So when she left, it felt brutal, but it was clean, clear, final. No manipulation, no breadcrumbing, just truth in its rawest form. I can't stay where my heart no longer lives. That's not betrayal, that's alignment. But it only hurts because you assume presence meant permanence. That if someone shows up today, they owe you tomorrow. But love doesn't work on credit. It moves in real time. And when it's no longer real, the most respectful thing someone can do is walk away before the lie grows louder. Stoic men understand this. They don't confuse endings with injustice. They don't demand explanations just to soothe their ego. They recognize that honesty doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it just comes with distance. And when it does, they don't chase. They don't beg. They don't rewrite the story. They just bow out with dignity. Because when someone leaves without malice, only clarity, you don't need revenge. You need reverence for the fact that she left before resentment arrived, that she didn't string you along just to keep herself comfortable. And maybe that's not coldness, maybe it's courage to admit I care about you, but I can't stay. So let this be clear. Her leaving wasn't the wound. Your resistance to her truth was. She didn't reject you. She just refused to pretend. And that's not something to resent. That's something to respect. Because honesty, even when it hurts, is still a form of love. Just not the kind you get to keep. But maybe exactly the kind you needed to receive. You thought she needed you. That you filled a space in her life no one else could. That your presence made her whole. But maybe you just made her comfortable. For a while. Until she realized she could breathe without you again. And that's what hurt the most, isn't it? Not the leaving, but the revelation that she didn't need you to stay balanced. That her world didn't collapse when you stepped out of it. Because here's the illusion. You mistook being wanted for being required. You believed your support, your consistency, your love secured your place in her life. And when that place dissolved, you weren't just heartbroken, you were disoriented. Was I never essential? Did none of it matter? But maybe it did matter. Just not in the way you hoped. Not as something permanent. Not as something owed. Because the truth is, love doesn't equal dependency. And someone not needing you doesn't mean they didn't value you. It just means they grew. And part of that growth was realizing their peace was no longer tied to your presence. And that realization isn't betrayal, it's evolution. But if your identity was built on being needed, her independence feels like a threat. It exposes that what you called love may have really been emotional employment. You weren't just loving her, you were making yourself indispensable. Because as long as she needed you, she wouldn't leave. Right. But people don't stay because they need to. They stay because they choose to. And when that choice ends, your job is not to question your worth, but to question your dependency on hers. Stoic men understand this difference. They don't anchor their masculinity in being a savior, a solution, a source. They don't love in exchange for a role. They love freely. And when that love is no longer received, they don't panic. Because their worth doesn't vanish just because someone no longer needs to hold it. They built themselves on solitude, on internal structure, on the knowledge that true power isn't in being needed, it's in being at peace when you're not. So ask yourself, were you really in love with her? Or with the version of yourself you saw reflected in her need for you? Because if it takes someone else's emptiness for you to feel full, you're not in a relationship, you're in a rescue mission. And when that mission ends, so does your sense of purpose. But there's a better way. Let go of the illusion, let go of being essential, and step into something deeper, the kind of love that doesn't fear freedom, that doesn't require dependency, that doesn't confuse usefulness with intimacy. Because when someone walks away and you still feel whole, that's not just maturity, that's mastery. Most men treat loss like a wound, something to be avoided, something to patch up quickly, something to blame on someone else. But Stoic men, they see it differently. They don't flinch when something ends. They don't panic when someone walks. They don't spiral when silence replaces closeness. They see loss as a mirror, a moment that reveals what was real and what was just narrative. Because here's the truth. You don't really lose people. You lose roles. You lose stories you were clinging to. You lose your illusion of control. And when those fall away, you're left with the raw version of yourself, the one not defined by who stayed or who left. That's why stoic men aren't afraid to lose, because they don't possess people to begin with. They practice presence, not possession. And presence, when it's not reciprocated, doesn't collapse. It completes its purpose and lets go. They don't say, "She took something from me." They say, "She left. And now I get to see what's left inside me." That's not weakness. That's strength of the rarest kind. Because anyone can fight to keep someone. But very few can stay dignified when someone chooses to leave. Loss is inevitable. Attachment is optional. Suffering is often self-made, and the man who understands this doesn't close up. He opens deeper. He lets the pain carve him, but not into a victim, into a vessel. One that can now hold more clarity, more peace, more self-respect. So the next time you feel that sting of her voice fading, her presence gone, her memory lingering, don't rush to erase it. Don't distract. Don't numb. Sit with it. Ask, what part of me thought I needed her to feel whole? What belief just got challenged? What strength can I build here now that she's gone? That's what stoic men do. They alchemize endings. They turn grief into wisdom. They build from ashes, not to prove anything, but to become something. Because what you lost was never yours to keep. It was yours to learn from. And now, you don't chase, you don't collapse, you don't close your heart, you nod, and you walk forward with something she never took with her. Your presence. Let's be clear, you didn't lose her, because you never owned her. You were invited, briefly, beautifully, maybe even deeply. But it was never permanent, it was never promised, and it was never yours to control. Because people don't belong to each other. They choose each other, moment by moment, chapter by chapter, and some chapters are shorter than you want them to be. But that doesn't make them less real or less valuable. It just means the invitation expired, not out of cruelty, but completion. She walked her road, you walked yours, and for a time those roads merged. But now they don't, and that's not a failure, it's a fact. But if you built your identity on the illusion that she was yours, then her exit feels like theft. It wasn't. You were just never meant to build a home on borrowed land, and that's what stoic men understand. Presence is rented, not owned. Every moment someone chooses to stay is a gift, not a guarantee. And when that moment ends, you don't demand more time. You give thanks for what was. Because if you can't appreciate the temporary, you'll never deserve the lasting. You say you loved her, then honour her choice to go, not by closing your heart, but by keeping your posture. By remembering that love is not about possession, it's about participation. You participated, you offered, you showed up. And that matters even if it didn't last, even if she doesn't come back, even if it ends without closure. Because being invited into someone's life, even briefly, is never something to mourn. It's something to respect. And when you respect what was, you don't carry bitterness, you carry clarity. That she didn't leave because you were unworthy. She left because her journey called her forward. And your path, it continues. Not with her, but with everything she left behind. Your growth, your strength, your stillness. So let go of the question, why didn't she stay? And start asking, what did her presence reveal that I needed to see? Because sometimes the person who walks away teaches you more than the one who stays. And that lesson begins the moment you stop chasing ownership. And start honouring the invitation for what it was. Temporary, transformative, enough. You keep replaying her smile, her voice, the way she said your name, the way she made you feel seen. And yes, that was real. But it wasn't the real gift. The gift wasn't her presence. It was the mirror she held up, without trying, without knowing. Because when she entered your life, you didn't just see her, you saw yourself more clearly than you ever had. You saw the parts of you that softened, the part that wanted to give, the parts that still carried fear but showed up anyway. And then you saw the parts that tightened when she pulled away, the insecurities that rose up, the need to be reassured, the way your identity cracked when her reflection disappeared. She wasn't just a woman, she was a mirror, and she showed you not just how much you could love, but how much of that love was still tangled in your need to be seen, to be wanted, to be held in place by someone else's approval. That's what hurt, not just the loss, the exposure. She didn't break you, she revealed you. And what you do with that revelation, that's the real turning point. Because most men run from that mirror. They blame her for showing it, for walking away, for not staying long enough to help clean it up. But stoic men, they don't run, they stand. They look into that mirror long after she's gone, and they ask, what part of me did she illuminate that I still haven't accepted? Not because they want her back, but because they want to become the man they thought they were when she was near. Not the man who only feels strong when reflected, but the man who now contains everything she once awakened. And that's the point. She didn't come to stay. She came to stir, to shine a light, to say without words, this is who you could be if you stop seeking mirrors and start becoming the reflection yourself. Her gift wasn't her affection. It was the way your truth cracked open in her presence. And now that she's gone, you have two choices. Forget the mirror, or finish what she started. Heal, grow, integrate. Not for her, for you. Because the next time someone enters your life, you won't cling to the mirror. You'll bring your own. Polished, still, unshaken. And that version of you won't need to be seen to feel real. He'll already know who he is, with or without anyone watching. Anyone can let go when they're angry, when they feel betrayed, when walking away feels like self-defense. But letting go without bitterness, that's rare. That's power. Because it's easy to close the door and label someone the villain, to call it their loss, to build armor out of your disappointment. But bitterness isn't closure. It's residue. It sticks to your skin, to your stories, to your next relationship. And the man who carries bitterness is still carrying her. Not in his heart, but in his tension, in his God, in the way he doesn't trust love again unless it comes with guarantees. But stoic men, they do something different. They don't just walk away, they release. Not because they weren't hurt, but because they know pain is temporary, bitterness is a decision, and they refuse to let someone else's choice dictate the state of their soul. They choose to let go with grace. They don't rewrite the past to protect their pride. They honour it for what it was, for what it taught, and for what it no longer is. She didn't stay. That's reality. But what you do next, that's character. You don't punish the next woman for the last one's exit. You don't become cold just to prove you're strong. You become clear. You build in a stillness so the next time love shifts, you don't shift with it. You hold, you listen, you allow, and when it's time to say goodbye, you say it. Not with resentment, not with desperation, but with reverence, because she was not your forever, she was your mirror, your invitation, your interruption. She came, she reflected, she moved on, and now you move deeper, not backward, not bitter, just forward. And maybe one day someone will ask you about her, and you'll smile. Not because it didn't hurt, but because you healed without closing, because you grew without hating, because you let go without needing to win. And that's real mastery. Not the power to keep what wants to leave, but the courage to open your hands and trust that your worth was never in what stayed. It was in how you let it go. She wasn't a prize. She wasn't a possession. She was a person, one who had every right to choose differently. And real love doesn't hold tighter when someone changes. It lets go without needing to make them wrong for walking away. You didn't lose her. You lost the illusion that love comes with guarantees. Have you ever realized you were clinging to a version of her, not the real her? What helped you finally let go?